Greetings and welcome to another edition of Around the World News, where I give you cutting-edge information to help you better understand the world in which you live. Well, let's get right into today's edition, and we're going to be talking about the cashless society, which, as you know, we are moving toward. The elite do not want us to deal in cash because they can't control us as well as they can as if we were in a digital money system, where all the money was in the banks and they can control us through high technology. But anyway, let's get right into this edition. I'm going to be reading some important information to you. All right, Scandinavian countries, nanny state, emasculated, feminist-run, top-down, elite, central planning, multicultural, all in brackets, are on the cusp of becoming some of the first cashless societies as a result of industry coordinated steps and government initiatives. Swish, that's S-W-I-S-H, a payment app developed jointly by the major Swedish banks, has been adopted by nearly half the Swedish population and is now used to make over 9 million payments a month. About 900 of Sweden's 1,600 banks, or rather bank branches, no longer keep cash on hand or take cash deposits, and many, especially in rural areas, no longer have ATMs. In conjunction with that, cash transactions were just 2% of the value and 20% of the volume of all payments made last year, down from 40% 5 years ago. Denmark's move to a cashless society is a deliberate result of policy, with the government removing the obligation of some retailers to accept payment in cash. Without this legislative push, we believe cash is very difficult to disrupt and substitute. After all, it is a free and convenient mode of transacting. So far, the selling point of most broadly used alternative to cash, checks and cards, is greater convenience. But that hasn't been sufficient to meaningfully reduce the market share of cash in countries outside Scandinavia and Canada. The flip side for consumers is loss of anonymity and privacy. The advantages of moving away from cash are perhaps the most pronounced for governments. Governments benefit most from lowering cash usage as a medium of exchange. Cash has peaked. Why is this? We see three key reasons. 1, increasing ubiquity of technology. 2, the willingness of consumers to use less cash. And most importantly, 3, policy action. We believe recent government action, for example in India and Europe, demonstrates the rising importance of supportive policy and accelerating the shift away from cash. The benefits for policymakers are clear. Electronic transactions allow for greater transparency and better control over monetary policy transmission mechanisms. So writes Tyler Durden in an article. Goldman Sachs asks, have we reached peak cash? Now, I remember 35, 40 years ago when I was going to the store, nobody used credit cards, or practically nobody. Most people pulled out their wallet, or women pulled out their purse and handed the cashier cash for groceries. Not today. Seldom do you see cash transactions for groceries, and more frequently, debit cards or credit cards. Why is that? Because you've been conditioned to use credit. Of course it's convenient. But is it the best mode of transactions? I don't think so. We have a saying, and it goes like this, and you've heard it yourself. Cash is king. Cash is king. When you pay cash for something, do you get a discount usually? Oftentimes you do. But if you're paying on credit, you're going to pay interest, and you're going to pay top dollar for the product. That goes with cars or homes or anything. But when you have cash in your hands, and you say, well, I'll give you, instead of paying, let's say $5,000 or $10,000 for a car or something on credit, say, look, I'm going to pay you $3,500 cash right here. And you pull it out of your wallet and you hand it to the guy that's selling you the car, all right? Well, that's a $1,500 discount you can pull off sometimes with cash in the hands. All right? So think about that. Now I'm going to read an article. I think this is by R.E. McMaster. I'm not positive. It doesn't say, but The right to privacy is a fundamental human right, basic to freedom. Even God gave man only a few restrictions, 10 basic negative laws, 10 thou shalt not commandments, and left everything else free and private. Freedom and privacy go hand in hand. Life equals time, equals energy, equals work, equals money, equals property. So, total control and surveillance of how we spend our money is antithetical to freedom and privacy. For if top-down central planning technocrats not only determine what we can use for money, but also monitor how we choose to spend it, with control for negative sanctions on us if the technocrats don't like it, then we are slaves. Then we are slaves. The elite globalist appointed technocrats control every aspect of our lives. We have zero freedom and privacy. We are goldfish in a bowl monitored 24/7 by the elite matrix technocrats. Control of money and how we spend it is total control of our lives, time and property, which is exactly how slave masters manage slaves. Accordingly, there is no privacy. None. Elimination of cash locks us in to a prison planet system run by elitist technocrats. Most people like to live their own lives as they see fit, just like driving their car where they want, when they want, all drivers being equally subject to the same laws, the same rules of the road, thereby harmoniously balancing out the rights and duties of the individual with that of the community. People do not like being locked up or jailed in prison. Children don't like being locked up in their closets, their rooms, or basements. Now, that's child abuse. If you're doing that to your kids, stop. That's not the way God says to discipline your children. Why? Because innately, people want to be free. People don't like being restricted, confined, enslaved, told what to do, how to live their lives, when, where, with whom, doing what. This means that freedom, liberty, is a basic human right so people can willfully determine their own destinies. Okay? Determine of their own free will how to spend their lives, their time. Where, when, with whom, doing what. More deeply, if one believes that one is created individually by God with a destiny in life, one must be free to pursue it. This is why over and over in history, men must be governed by God or ruled by tyrants. Tyranny fills the vacuum of unbelief. It therefore follows that people should only be locked up if there are real and present danger to society, to the culture and community, to other people and their property, if there is to be true and legitimate equality, justice, and equity in a society. All right? Property rights are an automatic and natural extension of human rights, the basic human right to be free. For without property, goods and services that people choose on their own, people would cease to exist. No clothes, no housing, no food, no fuel, no medical care, no money, etc. means no life, no freedom. So ownership and control of personal property is an automatic extension of the basic human right to be free. In the modern world, since money is the medium of exchange for procuring property and determining how we spend our lives and what we can buy, money is freedom because money represents and purchases property, goods, and services and allows a person to be free to determine how they will live their life, where, when, with whom, doing what. This means in turn that is most important that money, this means in turn that is most important that money be legitimate. There looks like there's some writing mistakes here, but I think you get the gist of what I'm saying. It further logically follows that legitimate justice, fair legal punishment should only be dished out in kind for violation of another person's or property, as far as for breaches of covenants and contracts, real harm done to other human beings. This is why Christ's second commandment, a great commandment, and the golden rule are foundational to any social order in resolving man's ultimate philosophical question of how to resolve the naturally arising conflict between the one and the many, balancing out harmoniously the rights of the community with the rights of the individual, achieved only by the long-term view of first serving before one is served. And I'll talk about the problem of the one of many that the Greeks never could resolve. I've got a book by the late R.J. Rushdoony, by the way, called The One and the Many. It was a problem that the Greeks wrestled with. Which is more ultimate, unity or diversity? Individualism or collectivism? Well, I'll just tell you in a nutshell that if you lean too far toward the unity, okay, or rather toward collectivism, you have totalitarianism, the state. As Hegel said, God walking on earth. You have the state getting their hands on everything, trying to control every aspect of society. Education, the banking system, the finance money system, economics, the home, the family, the military, everything. Rather than that, God has in view individual freedoms, and restrictions are only put on us by His commandments. Other than that, you're free to do everything. And as Jesus summed up the law, love your neighbor, or love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. All right, continuing. I digressed a little bit. So most crimes are not a state matter per se, but rather a proper restitution, restoration, repayment matter between individuals that courts and juries adjudicate, preferably church courts or local courts of one's peers. So, we have little need for the massive state-operated elitist prison and court system in existence today, not with a legitimate eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, restitution-based criminal and civil legal system. And by the way, that eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, it's not to be taken literally. It just says, biblical law says that the crime, or the punishment fits the crime. In our legal system, it's like the punishment is supposed to fit the criminal. But that's not the biblical view. And the eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth is just teaching a principle of restitution. You see, in the biblical system, there was no prisons. It was either the death penalty for corporal punishment, for capital offenses, you were put to death, or you made restitution. If you stole somebody's ox, you had to restore, multiple times that, maybe 3 or 4 times. You had to repay 3 or 4 oxes for one ox if you stole it. God stipulated the amount in His Word. So if you go out and steal somebody's car, you don't get locked up in jail at taxpayers' expense, having a nice cushy place to lay your head and 3 meals a day. That's not justice. Justice is you go and work your butt off and you pay back that car. You pay that car that you stole, okay? If you kill somebody, you forfeit your life. This is God's view of justice. It additionally follows that since it is a basic human right to be free, to freely hold property of one's choosing as a necessary extension of that basic right to be free, that money should also be free of one's choosing, to be used freely and privately as one so chooses, since money is a flowing extension of and represents human freedom and property. Life equals time equals energy equals money equals property. A biblical system of money was based on gold or silver. That was what was used in biblical days. And even in the United States history, we had a money system based on silver, coined silver. And then when we went to the paper system, it was still backed by gold or silver, but not today. It's only backed by your confidence or faith in your government. And as you know, because the government is run by the Federal Reserve System, they can print as much money as they want, which causes inflation. They basically manipulate the money supply, create the booms and the busts. They created the Depression of 1929, 1930. Yeah, our federal government was behind that, or the bankers, the Federal Reserve. We really need to get rid of the Federal Reserve. We need to change it because it's an evil system and it's impoverishing the average American and enriching the bankers. And it's actually enslaving everybody. All right, so The last thing we need is an elite, privately owned monopoly central bank. Amen. The fifth plank of Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto. By the way, if you happen to be in college and you're watching this video, ask your professor, your economics professor, what does he think of Karl Marx? Because a lot of professors today in the colleges are really socialistic, communistic. And they're not going to come out maybe and tell you that. But they believe that the state manages things better. That the state should be in control of the economy rather than individuals making free choices. In other words, capitalism. Capitalism is seen as evil somehow. Whereas communism, that's a good thing, right? Just tell that to the families of the millions of Russians who were murdered under communist Russia or communist China under Mao Zedong. Continuing. So, that creates money out of nothing and charges compound interest on it, as well as is owned and run by foreign power that deliberately enriches its already rich psychopathic cronies, which is the case today all over the world. Not only is a monopoly privately owned central bank basic to communism, it results eventually, inevitably, in control over all of society, since money equals time equals energy equals property equals life, thereby violating the most basic human right of being free. Therefore, a central bank is an assault on human rights at the core, as is the fiat money it creates by way of cash or through its bubble-creating fractional reserve money system. Likewise are taxes, always procured by the force of the state upon threat of imprisonment, a limitation of the basic human right of freedom. And whenever are such evils necessary or justified? Yeah, when are they? Evil is evil, right? From the above, it becomes an easy and quick deduction that a basic human right, as an extension of the basic human right of freedom, is the right to be left alone, the right to privacy, to live one's life as one chooses, as long as one does not violate another individual's person or property or breach one's covenants or contracts, violation of which triggers restitution by the injuring party to the injured party. Are you grasping this, people? Therefore, in a continuum of continuity, a free individual is one who lives peacefully and lawfully in a self-governing way, respecting the rights and property of others, honoring one's covenant and contracts, causing no violent harm to the existing social order. All right? You don't have the right to harm another person's property or to steal their property. And that includes the state through inflation. Inflation is theft, but it's done by the state. And people think it's okay. It's still theft. Theft is theft, whether it's done by the individual or by the state. It's wrong. Money represents exerted human energy / life / time / goods and services, a legitimate extension of the basic right of freedom, and to do so privately, consistent with all the above, because privacy is an extension of freedom as opposed to incarceration, where there is zero privacy. It thereby follows that the use of cash and precious metals is representative of the fundamental human right of freedom, of life equals time equals energy, money equals property, so on, as a legitimate flowing extension of the basic human right to exist privately, which is freely. And last, today's government's comprehensive surveillance, central government control of all aspects of life, top-down, elitist central planning, rules, regulations, surveillance, and enforcement, the lack of justice, and the unequal application of law, plus monopoly, elitist, central bank control of money, causes life, except for the ruling elite, just like in communism, to be no different for ordinary people than being in a prison, incarcerated. For Americans, the effective shredding of the Bill of Rights, which protects individuals from government abuse, is testimony to the matrix prison we live in today, a prison without walls, where the walls themselves spy on us. As throughout history, the greater the number of rules and regulations, the greater the surveillance. The more elitist, unjust, and corrupt is the governing matrix system. Recall Angela Merkel's communist East Germany. Such gives rise to the legitimate personal concerns and fears. Of course, the first fears we all must conquer are the real and imagined ones in